First, I want to tell you that I was born in the islands of Bombay, you know that. And Bombay is a very different city compared to the other cities in India, a commercial city, a lot of crime. And I was the only son of my parents. I lost my mother when I was 9. I grew up with my father in his workplace team, so I was brought up with servants, and I grew up alone. I didn't have any brothers or sisters or anyone. I was always a lone child, and a lot of responsibilities fell onto me at a very young age. As I said, my place was on the beach, you know, facing the sea. It was on the beach, and a lot of foreigners and people used to come and rent out rooms in my house. We had 6 big rooms, a lot of tourists there. And I was in school at that time. This was way back in 1976, 1974 at that time. And these foreigners used to come in. I used to smoke cigarettes at that time at a very young age, and slowly went into hash. And this, since my place was open, my father was not around. My father used to come at weekends, and he would just give me money because he couldn't spend time with me and give me his love, you know, so he would compensate with cash. If I asked my father for $1,000, he would give me 2,000, you know, he was that way. And that money also ruined me a lot, because I started being exposing myself to prostitutes, to drugs, to crime, and a lot of friends that came over to my house and started using. Slowly I found that the need of drugs was so high that somebody had to get it for us all the time. So I started pushing and ended up becoming one of Bombay's biggest pusher. I was known by the press as the prince of the suburbs. I had a big long ponytail, and I was quite healthy because I love swimming. So living off the coast, you know, swimming was one thing that I always did, so I had a good physique. When I was pushing drugs to my friends and people, there were a lot of underworld kingpins that came around and trying to demand money from me, from my business. And I wouldn't give in to them, so I had to fight them. And after fighting them, I slowly became a kingpin in the underworld. I was recognized. I had a group of guys working for me, 7, 8 guys. Of course, in this period of time, I fell in love with 2 beautiful women, and I lived with both of them. They both loved each other. I got married to one in court and the other in church. I don't know if and we lived as a family, but they couldn't take it afterwards, because being a kingpin in the underworld in Bombay means you have to be mature, be a man. You have to sleep around with, this was the kind of ego that I lived with. I slept around with any woman that came to my joint to buy drugs, took advantage of them. There was one time when I had taken an overdose, and there was this particular girl that I used to always look down upon her. And because many men had taken advantage of her, she was someone who didn't have an elder brother. And when I had taken this overdose, I was in a particular room alone at that time. I was taking short morphine. I was dying, and this girl came around and she saved my life. She took me to hospital, and I used to always call this girl, "Hey, you're an easy lay," you know. And I used to look, but when she took me to hospital and my life was saved by her, if she had not been there, I would have been dead. And I was unconscious, and when I came to consciousness in the hospital, I found that she had a small Bible placed on my chest and she was praying. And I looked up and I seen Lorna. And I said, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "I was the one who brought you to hospital." Then the nurse and the doctor explained that she had got me to hospital and saved my life. That's the time when I changed a bit. That was the first time I felt God working in my life through her, and I changed. I stopped harming women. I started fighting for them. I started closing down brothels and flesh trade centers in Bombay. because I had many boys working with me, including gambling and things, and closing down joints and things. And slowly I had many cases, about 111 cases on me for all sort of crime, whether it was narcotics or caught with arms or whatever. And there was a time when I was externed out of Bombay because of so many cases. You know, it's externment, they send you out of the city for a period of time, you're not allowed to come in. And that's the time I had lost all my friends, all my guys who worked with me, my gang boys or whatever. They were not there, I was alone, I was out in another place. And I needed money, I needed to come back to Bombay, pick up money, pick up my brown sugar or morph. And that's the time when I came back to Bombay and the police got to know that I was there. They had obtained a shoot at sight order from the court. And they were all ready to, kill me. But I had no place to run, so I ran towards the sea. And this part of the sea is full of rocks. I just ran there, and the tide was going out, pulling out at that time, and I ran to the sea, and a big wave kind of just pulled me out into the sea, and that's the time I heard the firing, they were firing at me. But I managed to get into the sea and was in the water. And I was drifting, and then I found myself in this river. Sea has currents. I was being pulled out into the sea. And I knew, because I was born on the coast, I know that this water is going to take me real deep down into the sea. I wasn't able to swim back. And I was just praying at that time. That's the first time I ever prayed, I think. And asked God, I don't want to die. I don't want to die drowning here. And I was floating for about 2.5 to 3 hours, just drifting out into really out into deep sea. And that's the time when I seen this boat coming across a small canoe, and it was very surprising because usually fishermongers use this current to go into the sea, not come against it. It's very tough to row against it. They're rowing boats. That's the time when I started shouting in Marathi, in the language that we speak. I said, "Vatso, just help, help, help." And this guy helped me, pulled me up into the boat, and he says, "Why?" And he said in Marathi, "Asa kaam kasa karte tu maraicha kaam karte." It means, why are you doing the works of death? And it didn't strike me. I was happy that I was on boat and saved. And I slept in the boat, and I went and slept on the dry nets. Time later, I heard the boat rocking and a kind of sound with the nets being pulled up. And I asked him what's happening in Marathi, and he says, "I've got a fish that they call God's fish. We call in Marathi God's fish, that is the smaller kind of dolphins which fishermongers don't kill." And he says, "I've got it in the net which is called a trap, or the net of confusion." And he says, "I've caught that and I'm just releasing it away." So he says, "Deva samasami solte." I'm leaving God's fish out of the net. And I said, "But this guy is crazy because he's going to lose all the fish he has in the net." And then I came next Saturday, I dropped off to sleep, and I reached the shore, and I was on the other side of the sea, the creek. And as I was getting off the boat, he handed me 10 rupees and said, "Here, have something to eat." And I said, "This guy has lost all his fish and now he's giving me money." And he says, "No, last night I'm happy I saved a fish that got caught into God's net." And when I reached, I had relatives on the other side of the sea, and I went there and I met them and I told them what happened last night. And they all laughed because they said, "Nobody has rowing boats on this part of the sea." So I said, "Must be." And saying, "No, there's no person like this." And even I knew that there was no person like this. It was something that I felt was a miracle. And that's the time when I wanted to make changes in my life. I wanted to give up. I went